Hey there, good evening, everybody. I want to welcome you here to the Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I'm the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. Apologize for the late uh, coming on. Took some stuff to the garbage and I got stuck in the elevator. Yep, elevator, elevator, the elevator from hell, so to speak. It wasn't anything major, just door wouldn't open on the one floor, so I had to go back down. It took me a while to realize it wasn't going to open on that floor, so I went back down and then walked up. And anyways, here we are. We're good to go. So tonight's topic, I'm just going to straighten this out a bit because it's kind of messed up, is what are the best progressive rock albums out there? So I know there's a number of people that have their own opinions about what actually classifies as a progressive rock album. I'm just looking for this to make sure. What actually classifies as a progressive rock album. However, there are a number of albums that many consider to be in the top progressive rock albums of all time. Certain bands have kind of dominated that too. So what I'm going to do is I've got a stack here I grabbed. These aren't necessarily the best albums of all time, but there's certainly top progressive rock albums. Some of them, maybe you don't even call them progressive, but I kind of think of them as progressive. So we'll talk about them individually, and then you guys can give me your progressive rock albums that you might be interested in. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is this one, Eloy's Silent Cries and Mighty Echoes. Now I could have went with Colors here too. Both really good albums. Some people might say that this isn't really progressive rock, that it's space rock, and that's a different genre altogether. I kind of get that, but I think this kind of falls under progressive rock as well. I do like this kind of color scheme going on here, and his head just keeps going back and back here. This is a really strong album. Very space rock sounding, very Floydish sounding, and kind of heavy too at times. There's a lot of that real heavy sound to this album. This was in my playlist at one time, not so long ago, maybe a year ago, I guess. But I like this a lot. It might be my favorite Eloy album. Pretty sure that it's near the top and definitely belongs in a list of considerations for the best progressive rock album. I don't think it's the best of all time, but it's definitely one of the best. Next up is their fellow space rockers, Hawkwind. This album's the same. Pretty heavy album. Got a real strong, heavy element. Sorry. Also a lot of a space rock feel to it. I like this picture. This is probably their best album cover, I think. Some people would go with Hall of the Mountain Grille. I'm not going to complain one way or another. I personally think this is a better album. It's got a lot of good stuff on it, heavy stuff, but very spacey at the same time. Assault and Battery and The Golden Void. Yep. So this album, to me, definitely deserves to be on any list that might you might want to consider the album for top progressive rock album of all time. So that's the two space rock albums that I have here. Next one, not a spacey rock. This one's very different sounding than any of those. Moon Madness. Now, I know a lot of people would probably go with the one with the camel on it, which is it's just at the tip of my tongue, and I can't remember what it is. but I haven't listened to that one enough to really give it that kind of consideration. I like this album a lot. It has a lot of stuff going on it that's really good. It's maybe a bit more of a instrumental album than you might find normally considered on here. I do like the cover quite a bit as well. Definitely an album that I would consider to be among the best progressive rock albums of all time. Minus the vocals, which aren't really that great, but they're not terrible either. They're just kind of very average, I guess. So Moon Madness from Camel. And you can't really do a best progressive rock album of all time or rock albums of all time without actually including at least one Camel album. And I remember the other one now, it's called Mirage. So I do own Mirage. It's waiting its turn to get in my playlist, but I haven't overly listened to it, but I think it'll probably end up as being one of my very favorite rock albums or very favorite prog albums of all time once I do get a chance to listen to it. Next one. This is an album that a lot of people cite as being one of their best. I guess I could have went with Octopus or In a Glass House I'm really tired tonight for some reason. Anyways, this album's grown on me a lot. So I've had this album longer than any other albums, going back to the early 80s when I actually had it in vinyl originally. Gave that all to my sister, so I don't really listen to it then anymore. And I never liked this album then. I thought it was, for a lot of reasons, I didn't like it, but turns out that my hearing wasn't very good at that time. This is actually quite good, especially Peel the Paint, fantastic tune. So Gentle Giants, Three Friends, definitely has to be considered as one of the great progressive rock albums of all time, as do multiple albums by that band. Same thing applies to this band, Genesis, Trot. You could put Nursery Crime or Selling Them by the Pound or Trick of the Tail or The Land Lies Down on Broadway, and you wouldn't be at all wrong in considering any of them for best rock album or best progressive rock album. This one, to me in particular, because of Supper's Ready, definitely should be considered a very progressive rock album. And as far as pure progressive rock albums go, this is one of the most pure. Next up, maybe the granddaddy of all progressive rock albums, this one, In the Court of the Crimson King, probably the original progressive rock album. Maybe one of the greatest of all times, too. They've got a lot of really good albums, though, so this one is just one of them, but I think it might be their best. It definitely needs to be considered with any album, with any topic, which includes the best progressive rock albums of all time. This one has to be put in there. Next up is a more recent album in progressive rock history, but I love it. I think it's their best album, and I think this band deserves to be mentioned along here. Dwellers of the Deep from Wobbler. To me, Wobbler is kind of the best progressive rock band of this century, arguably. I mean, some people might go with a couple of other progressive bands that are pretty big, but pure progressive sound, that Yes Genesis cover sound, this is the band. I love this album. Next up is from Yes, of course. You could put this album up there as being one of the greatest of all times. Fragile, you could put Close to the Edge in here. Probably would have put it in here if I could have found it, but I couldn't, so took this. But there's a few other Yes albums that would be mentioned along here, and you wouldn't be wrong in mentioning this as one of the great progressive rock albums of all time. Next up, from Rush, you could have picked Farewell to Kings or Hemispheres. Hemispheres, I think, is more progressive than A Farewell to Kings. Very similar I think Hemispheres is a heavier album than Farewell to Kings, but I think Farewell to Kings has more of that classical sound. Although they both have both of those two albums, they're very similar albums. I definitely consider both of them among the best progressive albums of all time. And then an album that some people might say is the best progressive rock album of all time, and then there's others would say it's not progressive at all. So you made the decision. Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. Anytime Pink Floyd is mentioned or this album is mentioned in any list, it's always got to be considered one of the best, if not the best of that type. And so those are the ones I kind of chose, but there's lots of other ones by these bands and other bands that could be considered here. These are just, I just wanted to grab a stack that I think, pretty much represents progressive rock at its best. And so I chose to pick those ones. The argument that people have with Pink Floyd is that Pink Floyd is not a progressive rock band because they don't have that really complex, multi-layered instrumentation to their music. They don't have the vocalist who is very high-pitched. Generally speaking, most progressive rock bands have that going on. They're not, in the truest sense, a progressive rock band because they have so many other elements in their music, psychedelia, space rock, hard rock, pop rock, noise rock, whatever you want to call it. All these bands, they have all those elements, but to me, this is a progressive rock album because it tells a story from beginning and end. It's well scripted together. It ties a lot of progressive sounds together, despite the fact that David Gilmour maybe doesn't have a high voice, there's nothing written that it has to be a high voice. Just a lot of people think of it as that. I don't know what most people would call this, but to me, this is as good a example of progressive space rock as there is, right? Some people would say Rush isn't really a full progressive rock band either, but a lot of people call them like heavy metal or hard rock or synth pop or whatever you want to call it. But to me, Hemispheres and A Farewell to Kings are as close to progressive as any of their albums. But they have progressive elements on almost all of their stuff. This is just more progressive than the other stuff. I mean, I listened to Permanent Waves and I never thought for a second it wasn't progressive rock. It's just me. Yes, of course, are the kind of poster child for progressive rock. Close to the Edge, considered by many to be the quintessential progressive rock album ever released at any point in history. And this one not far behind because it came out just prior to Close to the Edge. Wobblers, all of their albums are very progressive in nature. They range in a kind of Genesis sounding all the way down to a Yes sounding, but just some really good instrumentation, that classic progressive sound, and the vocalist is fantastic. Definitely has a John Anderson flavor to his voice. And these guys, I don't know what else you would call this. Psychedelic? No, I don't think so. I think this is very progressive, more so than just about anything else. So it's got a little bit of a space rock feel to it as well, as a kind of a pastoral sound at times too. When you get to Genesis Foxtrot, this is one of the albums that first made me start really thinking about what was progressive rock and what wasn't. Up until this point, I kind of took what people said as gospel and progressive rock, but this one kind of made me realize, yeah, this has got every element that you want in a progressive rock. We've got some classical stuff here. You've got some complex musical arrangements. You've got some great keyboard sounds, some synthesizer parts to it. The lyrics are catchy as hell on most of these tracks, and kind of tells a story as you get in Supper's Ready. So for me, Gentle Giant may be the quintessential progressive rock band. They've got more instruments than anybody else going on. They use a lot of harmony vocals and complex signatures and complex arrangements, like everything that you think of when you think of progressive rock, they're doing. Very uncommercial sounding. Like I said, multiple different types of instruments going on, and many different vocalists as well. So yeah, they've got every element you could think of when it comes to progressive rock. This band, very different, more instrumentally. Some people might go as far as to say these guys are a little bit more on the jazz fusion side. I don't really hear that, but yeah, I guess you can maybe make an argument for it. But I always think of these guys as more pastoral in nature, as far as a much quieter, softer, not a heavy band by any stretch, at least not on this particular album. Maybe a little more on some of the other albums. I could have chosen the debut. I like that quite a bit as well. Hawkwind, definitely a space rock band. No two ways about it. It's in every album that they have. There's some form of space rock. But there's also a progressive element to their music. Because of the different types of instrumentals, the storytelling, and of course their album covers. But some would say no, it's just pure space rock, maybe some psychedelic rock, where it's just they've found a formula that they like, that they kind of repeat throughout their albums, adding maybe a little bit of this element or a little bit of that element to their music on each album, but always dominated by that sound. And probably the same could be said for Eloy, although I think Eloy's earlier stuff has a lot more of that progressive sound to it. More, not nearly as spacey as some of the later stuff when they kind of took up the Pink Floyd mantle in the at points. This album is a good example of that Pink Floyd stuff, probably the best example. But I like just about every album they have. I've listened to that I own. I like them all. Many of them waiting their turn. One of them just went in to my playlist. This is just such a strong album discography by these guys. Always got to mention them whenever I'm talking about one of my favorite progressive rock bands. So that's my kind of shtick on all of this. Perhaps I chased people away when I didn't start on time. I apologize for that. Next time I'll take my garbage out early and not get myself stuck. When I was sitting there thinking, God, it's got to be after 8 now, and I'm going to be late. It happens, right? So that's my take on what I think are among the best progressive rock albums of all time. I'm not sure which particular progressive rock album I might consider to be the best of all time. I guess you would have to consider, if I had to narrow it down, I would probably say it would be between 3 albums in my estimation. 1, Close to the Edge. 2, Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. And number 3 would probably be Selling England by the Pound. So those to me are the big 3 progressive rock albums. I probably should have included some Jethro Tull here too. I mean, of course, ELP, many people figure they were the first really kind of dominating progressive rock band, really putting it on the map with their debut album and trilogy, and those ones too, all of which could be mentioned here as well. I'm not an ELP fan myself, so I don't really think of them much when I'm doing this kind of thing, but just because you're not a fan of something doesn't mean you can't appreciate the impact that they've had. And Emerson, Lake and Palmer, their first half dozen albums, first 4 or 5 anyways, among the very best progressive rock albums out there, according to many people. And I always take some hits when I don't include them. So I'm going to include them just so I don't take those hits this time. In the more modern era of the neo-prog bands from the 1980s, which, by the time 1980 came, most people figured progressive rock was gone and would never return, me included. I was very much included in that. And so I kind of had a time period after about 1985 where I was drifting away from rock music altogether because I figured prog rock was dead. And then my friend introduced me to Marillion. And I thought, okay, so there's one last band that's trying to stay alive, stay it off, right? But many years later, of course, I found out there was multiple bands: Pendragon, Palace, North Star, Solstice, IQ, of course, all these neo-prog bands from the 1980s really did bring, I think it brought it back from the precipice. And then you've got a whole bunch of stuff that's going on now. It's probably more now than there's ever been. And many of these groups I like quite a bit. I don't know if I like them as much as the original bands from that original era of prog rock from the late 60s and early 70s. But there's still enough really good stuff out there that it's worth pursuing. And I've discovered a lot of progressive rock bands that I didn't even know existed, because in that time period you didn't have the internet, so you couldn't look them up. So if you didn't get their albums or see them on the radio or hear about them in concert, then you wouldn't know anything about them. And that's pretty much what kept a lot of them obscure for me. But these, to me, are the main bands when it comes to progressive rock. Minus, of course, I forgot ELP, but nobody's going to hold it now. Now, if you're going to talk about American progressive rock or North American progressive rock, because you might want to include Canada in this too, there's a lot of stuff that I haven't gotten into. I'm not really sure why I have a little bit of a block when it comes to American prog. There are some I do like, though. For sure, I do like them. People will crack me over the head for suggesting that Kansas isn't a progressive rock band. So maybe I should stop preferring that and just accept the fact that they are a progressive rock band who, of course, have some other elements to their music. Styx is like that too. They have some progressive elements to their music, but I tend to think of both of those bands as hard rock bands with progressive elements, But lately, I don't know about Kansas's new stuff because I haven't really listened to it, but the Styx new stuff is just great and it's very progressive. So I think you got to really start looking at that. Even Chicago had some progressive rock elements to their music too. Journey, Ethos. You could go down the line. There's lots of bands that are from the United States that have very strong progressive elements to their music. I think the problem I have with it is that I always think of the US as being dominated by hard rock bands, because most of the hard rock bands I like, or bands that I think of as hard rock, are US based bands. Pretty much. Some Canadian as well. So anyways, that's where we are with this video today. I hope that people will get a chance to look at this and maybe make some suggestions to it when they come aboard. I'm probably going to pack it in a little bit early. I'm really tired today for some reason. I think it's a combination of the heat and not being able to sleep all that well last night has left me feeling kind of very groggy. Anyways, I'm going to end the video now. I hope some people get to look at it, maybe make their suggestions as to what they think, or make their arguments about what whatever I've said. Anyways, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. Much appreciated. And we will be back. Actually, we won't be back next Sunday or any Saturday, Sunday, or Monday next week. There'll be no videos other than the series that we're putting on through the month of August and July, as I will be away out of town for those days. I may do a video while I'm out of town, but I don't want to say that I'm going to and then I don't. So anyways, take care and have yourself a good evening, and goodbye from Prog Monster.